Naram Cheva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayaudiraya Nashtaprayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavate Uttam Shloke Bhaktir Naistiki Om Agyantimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Mukham karoti vachanam pangam langyate giri yat kripatamaham vande Shri Guru Dinataranam Paramanandam Madhavam. Hare Krishna, thank you so much for joining in our scheduled discussion for Bhagavatam. So today we are starting a new chapter, the 17th chapter of the 4th canto, titled Maharaj Prithu Becomes Angry at the Earth. So in the 17th chapter, we will see Maharaj Prithu getting angry at Mother Earth because of widespread famine in his kingdom, because Earth was not producing the requisite quantity of crops and fruit grains. So he becomes angry at her and decides to punish her. And the chapter concludes with prayers by Mother Earth. So it has 36 verses in the chapter. And so the verses are philosophically straightforward, but Srila Prabhupada has wonderful preaching purports. So the verses have a fair bit of purports, not because to explain the philosophy, that part is straightforward, but to use it to establish the basis of Krishna consciousness, good behavior of devotees, interactions, etc. So mostly purports are preaching purports. It begins with inquiries by Vidur, and then we see Maharaj Prithu getting angry at Earth, Earth assuming the form of a cow to escape him from his anger. And finally, Maharaj Prithu catches up to her, and we see Mother Earth giving several reasons why she should not be killed. Maharaj Prithu countering with his own reasons why she should be killed. And the chapter ends with Mother Earth surrendering to Prithu Maharaj and offering prayers to glorify and pacify him. Okay, verse 1. Maitre uvacha evam so bhagavan vainya khyapito gunakarmabhi chandayama shatan kame pratipuya jabhinandayacha. The great sage Maitre continued. In this way, the reciters who were glorifying Maharaj Prithu readily described his qualities and chivalrous activities. At the end, Maharaj Prithu offered them various presentations with all due respect and worshipped them adequately. So this is a segue from the previous chapter where we had seen the wonderful prayers offered by the suttas, the bards to Maharaj Prithu. And this is a summation. In this way, they offered the prayers. And what did Maharaj Prithu do when he heard the prayers? He worships them adequately and gives them gifts. So this essentially begins the section of Maharaj Prithu, even though he appeared in the previous chapter but this essentially begins the section of Maharaj Prithu ascension to the throne. So the fourth canto began with a quick recap of how we got here. The fourth canto begins with the genealogical table of the daughters of Manu, and in the subsequent 6 chapters, there is the description of Prajapati Daksha, his offense to Lord Shiva, and Sati Devi giving up her body. The section ends with Daksha asking for and receiving forgiveness of Lord Shiva, and then completing the performance of Yajna. So these 7 chapters essentially talk about bhakti in the mode of ignorance, tamasic bhakti. Then the second section of 5 chapters from 8 to 12 talk about the activities of Dhruva Maharaj. Begins with him being insulted by his stepmother, Suruchi, leaving the palace of his father at the age of 5, performing austerities, obtaining the mercy of the Lord, then returning, being welcomed into the kingdom, ruling the kingdom for 36,000 years, fighting with the Yakshas at the death of his brother Uttama, and then finally returning to his eternal abode in Dhruvaloka. So these 5 chapters talk about bhakti in the mode of passion. In the third section of 11 chapters, which is from 13 to 23, the activities of Prithu Maharaj are recited. So it begins with the lineage of Dhruva being described, leading to the appearance of King Anga and his sinful son Vena, the killing of Vena and the appearance of Prithu Maharaj from the body of Vena. Then we will see Prithu Maharaj milking the earth to protect his citizens. We will see the Ashwamedh Yajna performed by Prithu Maharaj, the stealing of his horse by Indra, instructions given to Prithu Maharaj by Lord Vishnu, then instructions given to Prithu Maharaj by Sanat Kumar, then instructions given by Prithu Maharaj to the citizens, and finally, Prithu Maharaj returning back to the spiritual world. This section is bhakti in the mode of goodness. So this particular verse, it shows the reciprocation of the king towards the sutas. So it says that Maharaj Prithu offered them various presentations with all due respect and worshipped them adequately. So this giving of the gifts is accompanied with abhinandaya, which is prayers, and pratipujya, which is respect. So this is the proper mode of giving gifts, that one should give a gift with proper respect and glorification. One should never give gifts in the mood of condescension or pride or resentment. I'm forced to give gift because of whatever reason, because everybody else is giving, or because it is social norm, or I'm giving a gift to show how great I am and how magnanimous I am. So this is all charity in the mode of passion and ignorance. Prithu Maharaj is demonstrating the proper way to give gifts. Abhinandaya pratipujya. That one should be giving gifts with gratitude. So one should be respecting the person to which gifts are being given, and one should also be rendering praise or glorification. So the real purpose of giving gifts is chandayam asha. Chandayam asha is to satisfy the recipient in all ways, not just materially, but also to satisfy in terms of the respect that the person deserves, the consideration that he has. And most of all, one should understand that when one is giving in charity, the person who's taking in charity is giving this person an opportunity to build piety. If there was nobody to accept in charity, then you could not give in charity. And if you cannot give in charity, then all the piety that accompanies charitable activities would not be there. The Maharaj Nriga, he was famous for giving charity. And he would give it with so much of gratitude. And thank you so much for allowing me to give in charity. So Maharaj Prithu is demonstrating that quality. The verse also reinforces that Prithu Maharaj was initially discouraging the Sutas from glorifying him, saying that he is not deserving that glorification because now the qualities are manifested. But now we see that he was pleased to accept the glories, essentially for the purpose of preaching, that to show that what are the qualities suitable for a perfect ruler. Verse 2. Brahmana pramukhan varna bhritya mayatya purodasha pauranjan padan shreni prakriti samapujayat. King Prithu thus satisfied and offered all respect to all leaders of the Brahmanas and other castes, to his servants, to his ministers, and to priests, citizens, general countrymen, people from other communities, admirers, and others. And thus they all became happy. So Prithu Maharaj did not just satisfy the Sutas, that you guys have glorified me, so I will give you gifts, but he satisfies the different grades of citizens in the country. So he satisfies them with gifts and with sweet words. So 2 points to be noted: the importance of speaking sweetly and the importance of being inclusive. And we see both of that being demonstrated. So Chanakya Pandit says in Niti Shastra, Samsara Katu Vriksha Dviphale Madhure. Samsara Katu Vriksha, that this material world is Katu Vriksha. It's a poisonous tree or a thorny tree. Dviphale Madhure. But it has 2 sweet fruits. And what are those 2 sweet fruits? One is pleasing words, and the second is association with good people. So Prithu Maharaj is sharing one of the sweet fruits of this material world, which is speaking in a pleasing way to the various citizens of the kingdom. In the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 17, Krishna says that austerity of speech consists in speaking words that are truthful, pleasing, beneficial, not agitating to others, and also in regularly reciting Vedic literature. So even before he speaks about reciting Vedic literature, Krishna emphasizes upon speaking in a pleasing manner. So one should first learn to speak in a pleasing manner and then speak from the Vedas. It is said that one's speech should be a window and not a wall. It should open a portal for access and not create divisiveness. Srila Prabhupada would often quote this, Satyam Bruvat Priyam Bruvat, Ma Bruvat Satyam Apriyam. That Satyam Bruvat Priyam Bruvat, that Bruvat means to speak. So even if you're speaking the truth, Priyam Bruvat, you speak it in a pleasing way. Ma Bruvat Satyam Apriyam. That one should never speak Apriyam, harshly, even if the person is speaking the truth. One may say that this is the truth, so I don't have to sugarcoat it. But etiquette is this is a Sanskrit proverb. I say etiquette is that Bruvat Ma Bruvat Satyam Apriyam. That don't speak even the truth in a harsh way. So Prithu Maharaj not only speaking sweetly, but he is respecting everybody, not just the elevated citizens like the brahmanas or the important citizens like the ministers, but also the common citizens and the so-called fallen citizens like the servants. And because of this, Prithu Maharaj gave respects to everyone and was respected by everyone. And this quality is actually present in Krishna himself. In the 11th canto, 7th chapter, it said that, therefore, O Lord, being weary of material life and tormented by its distresses, I now surrender unto you because you are the perfect master. You are the unlimited, all-knowing Supreme Personality of Godhead, whose spiritual abode in Vaikuntha is free from all disturbances. In fact, you are known as Narayan, the true friend of all living beings. This is spoken by Uddhav to Krishna. So Narayan here refers to Krishna in two ways. So Narayan is one who gives shelter to Lord Narayan. And Nar also means the embodied soul. So Narayan also means one who is a friend to the embodied soul. So Krishna is famous for this, that at one end there is Lord Narayan, not different from Krishna. He's giving shelter to Lord Narayan and interacting in a friendly way with him. And the other end there is the embodied Jiva. He is also friendly to him. Same Narayan word is applicable to both relationships. So actually the purport to this is actually verse 18. Hridayanand Maharaj comments that that usually great people, they do not make time for common person. But here Uddhav glorifies Krishna as the shelter of the great Lord Narayan, as well as the insignificant living entity. So that inclusiveness is a quality that is present in Krishna. We see that in Prithu Maharaj, and it's a quality that is also glorified. We see that also in the first canto, 13th chapter, when not 13th, 12th chapter, when Krishna enters into Dwarka, we see that how he greets each and every citizen. He greets the learned brahmanas, he greets the ministers, he greets the friends, he greets the servants, he even greets the prostitutes. So everyone he greets appropriately. Not that he greets them in the same way. To the brahmanas, he falls down at the feet and gives obeisances. To his friends, he embraces. And to others, he glances at them in a merciful way. So he interacts with all of them and reciprocates with them. So Prithu Maharaj is displaying the same quality of being all-encompassing in his appreciation and reciprocation. Okay, moving on. Verse 3. Vidurvacha kasma dadar gorupam dharatri bahurupane yam dudo prathustatra ko vatso dohanam chakim. Vidur inquired from the great sage Maitreya, my dear Brahman, since Mother Earth can appear in different shapes, why did she take the shape of a cow? And when King Prithu milked her, who became the calf and what was the milking pot? So in 5 verses, from verse 3 to verse 7, Vidur will ask Maitreya 6 questions. And that will become the basis of further discourse by Maitreya. Now, Vidur's question here are not completely based on what Maitreya has spoken to him so far, because Maitreya has not mentioned that Mother Earth will take up shape of a cow and Prithu will milk her, but he is speaking out of his own previous understanding. So Vidur, being a great devotee, had obviously heard the Bhagavatam, had heard about the glories of Prithu Maharaj, and now that Maitreya Rishi is describing Prithu Maharaj, he is asking the questions that he had heard about. That why did Mother Earth take the shape of a cow? When did Maharaj Prithu milk her? Who became the calf? And what was the milking pot? All these questions will be actually answered in the next chapter, in the 18th chapter. Prakritaya Vismadevi Kritatena Samakatham Tasya Medyam Hayam Deva Kasya Heturapaharat. The surface of the earth is by nature low in some places and high in others. How did King Prithu level the surface of the earth? And why did the king of heaven, Indra, steal the horse meant for the sacrifice? Verse 5. Sanat Kumarat Bhagavato Brahman Brahma Viddotama Labdva Jnanam Svijnanam Rajarishikam Gatim Gataha. The great saintly King Maharaj Prithu received knowledge from Sanat Kumar, who was the greatest Vedic scholar. After receiving knowledge to be applied practically in his life, how did the saintly king attain his desired destination? Srila Prabhupada comments in the purport that one of the four Vaishnava Sampradaya, it emanates from the four Kumar, which is essentially the Kumar Sampradaya, and the prominent Acharya over there is Nimbarkacharya. He also takes this opportunity, like I said, mostly preaching purpose in this, so he takes the opportunity to caution one against deviating from these four authorized sampradayas. And he says one should only follow bona fide representatives from authorized sampradaya. And one of the reasons is that a mantra received from outside the sampradaya will not be effective. Sampradaya vihenascha mantraste nishphala mata. This is a verse from Padma Purana. So in the 8th chapter of this canto, when Narad Muni was giving instruction to Dhruva, he says that he is giving him the Japascha Parmo Ghuyam, that the most confidential mantra. When he gives him the Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, he says Japascha Parma Ghuya. And then in the purport, Srila Prabhupada says that if it is confidential, then why is it openly mentioned in writing in the Bhagavatam? And then he answers the question that it is confidential in this sense. One may receive a published mantra anywhere, but unless it is accepted through the chain of disciplic succession, the mantra does not act. It is said by authoritative sources that any mantra chanted without having received from disciplic succession has no efficacy. That's why it says mantraste nishphala matha. So even though Prithu Maharaj himself is an incarnation of Krishna, he accepts Sanat Kumar as a guru. We similarly see that Srila Vyasadeva, who's also an incarnation, accepts Narad Muni as a guru. Even in the material fields, we'll see that top athletes will accept coaches, even though they themselves may be at the top of their sport, but they will still have a coach. So this submission to external guidance is very important, and even more so in the spiritual field where the progress is more subtle than material. So the guru is able to objectively show the right path. So even elevated personalities may lose objectiveness about themselves. So that's when the guru comes and shows them the right path. And the inquisitiveness helps one to see where one is situated on this path. And the humility helps to make progress. So this is essentially the three aspects of the famous Tadvidhi Pranipatena Pariprashnena Sevaya. So the position of the Guru is that he shows the right path. Then Pariprashnena, it helps one to see where one is situated. That am I strong in this and weak in something else? Am I too much into my own mental speculation? So that the inquisitive essentially reveals one's own standing. And Pariprashnena Sevaya. And what does humility allow one to do? It actually allows one to make actual progress. So when these three things come together, the disciple makes progress. Okay. Verses 6 and 7. Yachanyadapi Krishnasya Bhavan Bhagavata Prabhu Shravashushravasha Punyam Purvade Kathashrayam Bhaktya Me Nuraktyaya Tava Chadokshajaya Cha Bhaktum Arasi Yoduya Venrupe Nagamima. Prithu Maharaj was a powerful incarnation of Lord Krishna's potencies. Consequently, any narration concerning his activities is surely very pleasing to hear, and it produces all good fortune. As far as I'm concerned, I'm always your devotee, as well as a devotee of the Lord, who is known as Adhokshaja. Please therefore narrate all the stories of King Prithu, who in the form of the son of King Vena milked the cow-shaped earth. So Mahatma Vidur, in the mood of a true devotee, is making sure that he conveys to Maitreya that he is not asking all these questions out of idle curiosity or just for gathering facts, but he makes several points to give a framework of why is he asking this question. So he says that Krishna Katha is glorious, Shrava, pleasing to hear, Sushravasha, and auspicious, Punya. So he's essentially asking Maitreya to do Krishna Katha, and he's saying, I'm asking you to do because it is Shrava, Sushrava, and Punya. And he says Prithu Maharaj is Purvadeha. Prithu Maharaj is an expansion of Krishna, a devotee of Krishna. So glorification of Krishna and his expansions and his devotees are all on the same plane. So my asking you about Maharaj Prithu is like the glorification of Krishna, same plane. And then he says Krishna is Adhoksaja. Adhoksaja means very difficult to perceive by senses. So Maitreya might say, you seem to know a lot about it based on the questions. He's saying, yes, but Krishna is Adhoksaja. I may have information, but I am asking you to reveal his pastimes. So he says Krishna is Adhoksaja. Cannot be perceived by senses, not by just information. But from the mouth of a devotee, Krishna is revealed through his pastimes. Then he says that I have only two qualifications. I am Bhaktaya me, that I am attached to Krishna, and I am Anuraktya Tava, that I am attentive to you. Prabhupada translates it as I am your devotee. And so he's saying that I'm following you sincerely, attentively, and I am also attached to Krishna. Therefore, Bhaktamarasi. Therefore, please recite the glories of Maharaj Prithu. And he says, some things I know, some things I don't. So answer the questions I've asked you, and also those that I may not have asked, things that I do not know about. So Prabhupada says that in this verse, the word adhoksaja means beyond the perception of the material senses is very significant. No one can perceive the personality of Godhead by mental speculation. Therefore, a person with a poor fund of knowledge cannot understand the personality of Godhead. Since one can only form an impersonal idea on the strength of one's material senses, the Lord is known as adhoksaja. So Prabhupada says that if one gathers information about the Lord, then the most that he can understand is the impersonal form of the Lord. But understanding the personal form of the Lord is beyond one's material senses. That understanding needs to be bestowed. So, quick recap of the questions asked by Maharaj Prithu. In the third verse, he asks, why did earth take the form of a cow? And this question will be answered. So I'll send you this table. You don't have to note it. The question is answered from 479 to 418:11 by Maitreya. Then in the third verse, he asks, who became the calf? What was the milking pot while Prithu was milking the earth? And this question is answered in 418 from verses 12 to 28. How did Prithu make the uneven earth flat? This is answered in 418 from 29 to 32. Why did Indra steal the sacrificial horse? The 19th chapter answers this question. Then in the 5th verse, what destination did Prithu attain after receiving Gyan and Vigyan from Sanat Kumar? So this is answered from 422:1 to 423:18. And in the 6th and the 7th verse, Vidur says, narrate all the glorious topics of King Prithu which are pleasing to hear and produces all good fortune. And this essentially is more or less the general theme. So from 417 to 423, this is answer 479 to 423. The general topics of Prithu Maharajas are answered. Okay, so I'll do one more verse, and after that we can pause for discussion. 417:8. Sutta vacha chodito vidurenevam vasudeva katham prati prashasyatam pritmana Maitreya pratyabhashata. Sutta Goswami continued. When Vidur became inspired to hear of the activities of Lord Krishna in his various incarnations, Maitreya also became inspired, and being very pleased with Vidur, began to praise him. Then Maitreya spoke as follows. So what was the impact of the questions by Vidur? Sutta indicates that Maitreya was also very happy to hear these questions from Vidur. And we see this as a theme in the 3rd and the 4th canto. We see that whenever Vidur asks a question, Maitreya becomes more inspired to speak. So actually asking questions is a way to inspire the speaker. Because without questions, the speaker may question the interest of the audience. And the speaker may lose interest in speaking. So it is considered customary for the speaker to ask for questions. And it is considered etiquette for the audience to respond by asking genuine questions. So we see this reciprocation going on between Vidur and Maitreya. That Maitreya says, I have now described everything. What more would you like me to speak? And then Buddha puts his question, and then along with the question, he will either in a direct or an indirect way indicate why the questions are relevant. What are his qualifications in asking those questions? What are the qualifications of Maitreya that makes him suitable in answering the questions? Vidur would express his appreciation and gratitude. And Maitreya becomes pleased, and because Vidur's question is giving him an opportunity to do Krishna Katha, so he thanks Vidur. And in this way, there is this mutual flow of appreciation between the speaker and the audience. Srila Prabhupada explains that the nature of Krishna Katha is that it continuously enlivens. In Bhagavad Gita 10:18, Arjun says to Krishna that I'm never satisfied in hearing about you. For the more I hear, the more I want to taste the nectar of your words. So in a lecture, Chaitanya Charan Prabhu, he writes about this. He says that in the material world, people become accustomed to happiness from sophisticated technological gadgets. When they hear about the description of the spiritual world, there are only simple activities. They wonder, how can one get eternal happiness? Actually, happiness comes from simple activities performed with love that is fully satisfying. Krishna does perform miracles like killing of demons or lifting Govardhan, etc. But that is not the ongoing source of pleasure. The ongoing happiness of the residents of Raja are through simple activities performed with love for Krishna. Just going out and tending to the cows, or doing pranks, or just doing nothing, just playing games. So Krishna, with all his opulences, could do so many things. But what does he do? He's playing games that children play, that you run and I'll touch you, or you hide and I'll find you, or sitting under the tree and talking. So the activities are simple, performed with love. So when Arjun says, I'm never satisfied by hearing, then the source of his happiness is the simple activity of hearing. He's not looking for any sophisticated form to enjoy Krishna. So one thing that we have to understand, that love has its own life. Just like there is a person, love is like a person, and it needs its own food to survive. For a person to live, person needs to eat. So love is a person, and the person needs food to survive. So the food for love is beauty, qualities and activities of the beloved. The more one hears about this, the more love will be nourished. So it does not say that love is nourished by complicated technological feats, by virtual reality, or by sophisticated technological gadgets. But it says that the food for love is appreciating the beauty, qualities, and activities of the beloved. That's it. The more one gets that food, the more love becomes nourished. And this is a universal principle based on hearing, chanting, and thinking. So the more we want to nourish our love for Krishna, the more we have to hear, chant, and think about him. So as love is nourished, it grows, and now that it is bigger, it needs more food. So there is more food given to it in terms of hearing, chanting, and thinking. So one hears about the qualities and activities. One chants the qualities and activities. One thinks about the beauty, appreciates the beauty. So simple things. But these cause the personality of love to be nourished and grow bigger. And when it goes bigger, then it needs more food. So there is more Krishna Katha, there is more Shravana, there is more Smarana. So we may not experience it completely ourselves, but we can witness it in personalities like Vidur and Parshit Maharaj. That we can see that how the love in them is constantly being nourished. So Maitreya is not like, Vidur, you've asked me so many questions. Just stop now. But Vidur is asking more and more questions, and Maitreya is becoming more and more enlightened. Parshit Maharaj is asking more questions, and Sukadeva Goswami is becoming more and more enthusiastic in replying. And then Parshit Maharaj is forgetting that he is starving and he's not drinking, and he is asking more questions. Because this process of hearing, chanting, and thinking is nourishing the personality of love. In this case, it is Krishna Prema that is being nourished. Prabhupada says in the purport that talk of Krishna Katha or topics about Krishna or his incarnation is spiritually so inspiring that the reciter and the hearer are never exhausted. That is the nature of spiritual talks. We have actually seen that one can never become satiated by hearing the conversation between Vidur and Maitreya. Both of them are devotees. And the more Vidur inquires, the more Maitreya is encouraged to speak. The symptom of spiritual talks is that no one feels tired. Thus, upon hearing the questions of Vidur, the great sage Maitreya did not feel disgusted, but rather encouraged to speak at greater lengths. So from the next verse, Maitreya will begin to speak. And let me pause here, see what discussions we have.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Just a question about saying things in a palatable way that you are describing. Even if you speak the truth to be spoken in a palatable way, in a way that people don't feel insulted or any other way. But we quite often also come across Prabhupada chastising his disciples for doing not the right things, but Prabhupada would be very hard on them. How to understand these two things? Is it? Can you please enlighten us a little bit on that?
Thank you, Prabhu. Good question. Srila Prabhupada and chastising his disciples is like the parents correcting the child for the benefit of the child, and he would say that at different times that it's not something that he enjoys doing, but he does it in the course of his duty. He says he did not like doing it, but because it was his duty to correct them as a service to Krishna and his Guru Maharaj, he would speak to them. The other point is that Srila Prabhupada, he spoke heavily, but he did not speak harshly. So as a guru, he would cut through to the disciple, cut through Maya for the disciple and say, this is not proper, you should not act like that. But he did not speak harshly. So harsh speech is when I'm upset at somebody and I start criticizing that person at a personal level, at an unreasonable way. That's that, like I start using different kind of language. So that is speaking harshly, where one is speaking for the purpose of insulting others. And Prabhupada never spoke like that. He did speak. He did speak strongly, as you mentioned. He had he had the duty of chastising his devotees for the purpose of correcting them. We see in so many other interactions where Srila Prabhupada was faced with adversarial circumstances, and he would maintain his present demeanor. So in the Back to Godhead, there was this article that was the earlier edition of Back to Godhead. His disciples wrote an article about Pushti Marg. Pushti Marg is coming from Vallabhacharya, and they're from Chaitanya Charitamrita. They wrote, Chaitanya Charitamrita speaks about Vallabhacharya being kind of corrected by Mahaprabhu. He had written a commentary on the Bhagavatam. He wanted Mahaprabhu to review it and endorse it. And Mahaprabhu didn't want to do it. And then Mahaprabhu makes this comment that one who is not chaste to one's Swami is a prostitute. And the purport of that comment was that Mahaprabhu was saying that there is already a commentary by Sridhar Swami. So what is the need to write another? But Vallabhacharya still persisted, so Mahaprabhu sent him to whom did he send it to? Shiv Gadadhar Pandit. He sends him to Gadadhar Pandit, and then Gadadhar Pandit actually does review it and kind of endorses it. So when Sumiti Morarji read that article, she was from Pushti Marg. She actually felt very angry about it, and she wrote a very, very angry letter to the editors of Back to Godhead. And she wrote things like, "Your Swamiji, the only reason he could come to America was because I gave him passage, because I helped him, etc." So the disciples were a little concerned what to do, so they went to Prabhupada. And Prabhupada then he speaks this specific proverb to them: Satyam Ruvat Priyam Ruvat Ma Bruyam Satyam Priyam. That what you're speaking is true because it's from Chaitamrita, but speak it in a way that it is palatable. So then they apologized to Sumati Morarji in a way that they did not accept what she was saying. They did not renege from their position, but still they gave respect to her, and she was pacified after that. And Prabhupada did that also. We see in so many confrontations. In Lilamrita, we see when he was in confrontation with Mr. Nair, who was trying to steal away the land in Juhu. So they were sitting across each other, and Prabhupada knew very well what he was doing. He was talking to people, getting his disciples beaten up, talking to the mafia, trying to get the lands stolen. Prabhupada was always speaking pleasantly with them. I mean, he was doing whatever he did to preserve the land, but he never lost his cool that way.
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. We see many times the Prabhupada say that we have to follow one of the four sampradaya. And we know that, in the Kumara sampradaya, even they pray to Krishna, they accept Krishna as the Supreme Lord. Of course, Brahma sampradaya we know. And even in Sri sampradaya also, maybe not Krishna, maybe more Lord Vishnu. But what about Rudra sampradaya? As we know I won't say I know everything on planet Earth, but in the Rudra sampradaya, as far as we know, they don't accept Krishna most of the time or every time as a Supreme Person of Godhead. And what basis we say we have to follow one of the four sampradaya?
So Rudra Sampradaya, as far as I know, Prabhu does accept Krishna as the personality of Godhead. Pushti Marg is essentially Rudra Sampradaya. Vallabhacharya, he appeared in the Rudra Sampradaya. And I don't know a lot about their specific practices and philosophy, but they accept the position of Lord Shiva as Vaishnava, as a preceptor of the Sampradaya.
And what about the Shaivite? Is it part of the Rudra Sampradaya or they are different?
They are different. Yeah, they are different. The Shaivites, they are not Rudra Sampradayas. So Shaivites accept Lord Shiva as the personality of Godhead. So like Shripad Shankaracharya. So they are Shaivites. They're not part of the Vaishnava Sampradaya. In fact, they're inimical to the Vaishnava Sampradaya. So they consider Lord Shiva to the personality of Godhead. They consider Shiv Puran to be the prominent Puran, and they worship Lord Shiva as the supreme. They tend to be mostly impersonalists, but the path to impersonalism for them is to Lord Shiva. So yes, you're right. They're not situated in the Vaishnava conception, but Rudra Sampradaya, as far as I know, is situated in the Vaishnava conception.
That means in a way the Rudra Sampradaya or the Shaivite, is it part of the Rudra Sampradaya or it was a derivative and that has gone their own way?
They haven't emanated from the Rudra Sampradaya. The Shaivites, just like we have the Shaktas. So there is a whole body of literature that talks about the Shaktas. They are worshippers of Durga Devi. So similarly, there is a body of the Vedas that talks about the supremacy of Lord Shiva. And there are people that follow that exclusively. So the Shaktas, they acknowledge the presence of Vishnu or Krishna, but subservient to Durga Devi. They consider Durga Devi to be the supreme. So they haven't emanated from any sampradaya. They're basically followers of those portion of the Vedas. Similarly, the Shaivites, they're followers of Shiva Puran and different tantras, etc. that exclusively glorify Lord Shiva. So it's a whole different section of the scriptures, whole different philosophical conception. No correlation between the Rudra Sampradayas and the Shaivites.
Okay. Thank you, Prabhu, for clarity.
Sure. Thank you, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Can I ask a question related to that?
Yeah, sure.
So you mentioned the Kumara Sampradaya, the current Acharya, not current, the later Acharya was Nimbarkacharya, is that right? Did I hear you right?
Nimbarkacharya. Yeah.
So I also have heard the name Vishnu Swami somewhere. Which Sampradaya does he come in?
Rudra Sampradaya.
He's Are there Kumara Sampradaya followers even now? And which part of India do we see them, like their practices and their primary temples and all of that?
Right, in Vrindavan. They're very prominent in Vrindavan. They have a lot of followers. So the Kumar Sampradaya is very strong in Gopi Bhav. And you see their followers in Braj, the temples for Kumar Sampradaya. There are a lot of devotees who follow that Sampradaya. So the most popular Sampradaya is the Shri Sampradaya. Then is the Madhava Sampradaya. And around the same is also the Kumar Sampradaya. Rudra Sampradaya, it is popular through the Pushti Marg, but Pushti Marg is, even though Vallabhacharya was Rudra Sampradaya, but he like Mahaprabhu did, he absorbed things from different sampradayas. Same thing Vallabhacharya did. But yes, he's basically the later exponent of the Rudra Sampradaya. Okay. Somebody else had a question?
Yes, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. 2 questions, Prabhuji. This is related to the communication that one need to make in a pleasing manner. Here, 2 things are noticed, Prabhuji. Like one, to an extent, even I noticed in myself, is like sometimes we lack the nuances of communication, that sometimes we hear people convey some things, their lack of interest or something, in a very subtle manner, and but as one doesn't catch those things and still go out speaking, thinking they are speaking truthfully, and then either it would offend the other person or they will give it back. So that is one scenario, Prabhuji. Like, how do we, what are the few things that, because nature is something can't be changed overnight, but as a principle, what are the few things that one need to remember in doing the communication? This is one aspect, Prabhuji. And another aspect that I saw, Prabhuji, like generally in a family setting, elders, even though they are 1 year elder or 6 months elder, they try to be in the preaching mode. They will be telling that, no, I am telling for your good only. And they will be little straight in giving the criticism or advice. In my heart everything is good, so for that only I am telling you, like that. These kind of things we hear, but still the receiver will not take it in the spirit they want to say, and also like sometimes what they are saying also might not be that great to accept too. So how do we deal these 2 kind of scenarios, Prabhuji?
Anutma Prabhu, he does this course on communication, and many points he makes, but I can try and summarize based on what I remember. So in terms of having meaningful conversation, whether you're at the giving end or the receiving end, 2 principles, if you keep in mind, they will elevate the conversation. One is to hear more and speak less. And the second is to give all respect to the other person. These 2 principles help quite a bit. Sometimes when we are talking, we are more committed to expressing our opinion, not so much to hear because we think we know more or we are right or whatever. So we are more anxious to do most of the speaking, conveying everything, and then we get offended when the person is not receiving it. So when we change that model and we change to more of hearing, Ananta Prabhu has many what he calls bag of tricks, like asking open-ended questions and giving affirmative feedback, verbal, non-verbal, echoing back the understanding that you have heard, validating that the other person is being heard. Doesn't mean you agree with the person, but somebody tells you that Lord Shiva is the supreme, you should be worshipping Lord Shiva and not Krishna. I can say that I hear that you're saying that Lord Shiva is supreme, and you're probably saying that based on understanding in the scriptures, and there are scriptures that say that. And we have to understand that there are scriptures that are more of goodness. So, whatever it is. But the only way that you can connect with the person is first you touch the person's heart. So find common grounds before talking about differences. So it's a 3-day seminar, and obviously I cannot condense it into a few minutes. But the overriding principles are these: that if you treat the other person with respect, regardless of whether the person is an advanced devotee or a less advanced devotee or a non-devotee, but we treat the person as with respect, and understand that communication is more about hearing and speaking. We will see that the quality of the communication will improve. The other person will acknowledge this, and the person's heart will open. The person will start asking more questions. So that will also follow inevitably. In some cases, it might not follow. Then it is so. It is what it is. Somebody comes to you and basically says, "I'm older to you, so I think this, that," and walks away. And it is what it is. If you can put your ego aside and say that, okay, this is what the person wants to say. It's not necessarily correct, but he wanted to say that, so be it. So, let it go by. Then the communication might happen externally, but it will not affect you internally.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you. It helped.
Thank you. Okay. So we'll be moving on to verse 9. Maitre vacha yada bhikshita prathuranga vipre amantrito jantayas praja nirne kshiti preshtetya shukshama deha patima abhyavochan. The great sage Maitri continued, "My dear Vidur, at the time King Prithu was enthroned by the great sages and brahmanas and declared to be the protector of the citizens, there was a scarcity of food grains. The citizens actually became skinny due to starvation. Therefore, they came before the king and informed him of their real situation." So in the next 2 verses, we will see the citizens presenting their situation to Prithu. And in this section from verse 9 to 17 is the description of King Prithu chasing Mother Earth as a cow, in the form of a cow. So they approached the king who was enthroned by the Brahmanas. And commenting on it, Srila Prabhupada, and this is a point Prabhupada makes several times, that this is the Varnashram system, the proper Varnashram system, where the Brahmanas, they do not rule, but they make sure that the rulers are properly situated. So the Brahmanas first enthroning King Vena, then removing him, then enthroning King Maharaj Prithu. So this is the duty of the Brahmana class. Just like it's the duty of the Kshatriya to protect, the Vaishya for commerce, and the Shudras to serve. So because of the evil rule of King Vena, there was widespread famine. Okay, verse 10 and 11. Vayam rajan jatrena bhitpata yatha gnena kotra stena vrikshaha Tvamadhyatah sharanam sharanyam yah sadhito vriti karapati nah tanno bhavani haturatvenam Kshudharditanam naradeva deva yavanna nakshayam aujitroja varta patistvam kilalokapala. Dear King, just as a tree with a fire burning in the hollow of the trunk gradually dries up, we are drying up due to the fire of hunger in our stomachs. You are the protector of surrendered souls, and you have been appointed to give employment to us. Therefore, we have all come to you for protection. You are not only a king, but the incarnation of God as well. Indeed, you are the king of all kings. You can give us all kinds of occupational engagements, for you are the master of our livelihood. Therefore, O King of all kings, please arrange to satisfy our hunger by proper distribution of food grains. Please take care of us, lest we soon die for want of food. So we see that the citizens, they first glorify the position of Prithu, that you have been created, Sadhita, by the Brahmins, by the churning of the Brahmanas. You're the Nar Deva Deva, that you are the king of the kings. Now, we also see that the citizens are not begging for food. They're saying, you please give us our occupational engagement. So one can understand that it's not that the citizens were lazy. So at that time, the main occupational engagement was farming, cow industry, farming. That was a prominent. There were others like the people doing pottery, the ironsmith, etc. But the main engagement was farming. In fact, until maybe in countries like India, maybe until 100 years ago, 80% of the population was engaged in farming. And only after the Industrial Revolution and other things that it has changed now. Now, like in the US, less than 5% of the people are engaged in agriculture. But the citizens at this time, they're saying, you give us engagement, which means that they were working. They were trying very hard to till the land and produce grains, but there was no grains. So they're saying that, allow us to do our work. We want to work hard. Allow us to work hard so that we can produce the grains by which we can eat and others can eat it also. And they want to emphasize on the urgency. They're saying you should not delay. Give us food so we do not die. So Ujita Urja, that they're saying that without food we may die. And Vartapati is, this is also our means of engagement. So allow us to resume our duties from the Varnashram system. So Prabhupada says that it is here indicated that although the people were allowed to perform their duties, they were still unemployed. Although they were not lazy, they still could not produce sufficient food to satisfy their hunger. When the people are perplexed in this way, they should approach the head of the government, and the president or king should take immediate action to mitigate the distress of the people. So in modern day economy, this situation is described as an economic recession. So economic recession means that there are people who are willing to work, but there is no work. Or the work is not suitably compensating the people. Verse 12. Maitre vacha prithu prajanam karunam nishamya paridevitam Dirgam dadyau kuru shrestha nimitam cho navaptyata. After hearing this lamentation and seeing the pitiable condition of the citizens, King Prithu contemplated this matter for a long time to see if he could find out the underlying causes. So one thing that we see is that the king was easily accessible by the citizens who were free to share their concerns. So this is not there in the present day. Very difficult to see the head of the state. Like if you walk up to the White House, you'll probably be shot. They'll be scared that you're coming to do something. So it's impossible to just go up to the house of the head of the state, knock at the door and present your concerns. But in the Vedic society, this was accepted. So traditionally, the kings would provide all kinds of protection to the citizens. Nowadays, it is the king who needs the protection from the citizens. So when they travel, they're heavily guarded, their houses are heavily guarded. That's because the position of the leaders as being the affectionate, the point of respect and affection of the common person has gone. That's where they need to protect themselves. So as soon as Maharaj Prithu was informed, he took immediate action. That Prithu Maharaj did not complain that I've just been enthroned, give me some time, let me appoint a committee to look into it. This is actually the fault of Vena, not my fault. Did not go into any of that. So he immediately took action. And also important to note over here that Prithu Maharaj, as an incarnation of the Lord, is very much aware of the difference between bhautik and adhyatmik. So the klesha that the citizens are speaking about, they are bhautik kleshas. They are not spiritual. They are material. Prithu Maharaj doesn't preach to them, saying that why are you so worried about this material body made of 5 elements that will eventually be destroyed? Chant Hare Krishna, be happy. No. So he is completely aware of the position of the soul, the position of material nature, but he immediately takes action to remediate their physical suffering. So it is the duty of the king to satisfy 3 kinds of needs of the citizen: the physical needs, the emotional needs, and the spiritual needs. So when Prabhupada is commenting on the rule of Dhruv Maharaj, Prabhupada writes that the king takes care of the physical and the spiritual needs as well as the well-being. The well-being comes under the emotional needs. So if the king takes care of only spiritual needs, then he is immature and hard-hearted. He is immature because he does not understand that not everybody is at the same level of spiritual advancement. So for a person who is materially disposed, then telling that person that you're not the body, so stay hungry, doesn't matter, is going to cause a lot of suffering for that person, and definitely not going to make a devotee out of him. So such a person is immature and hard-hearted. If the king only takes care of the material needs, then all that he is doing is that he's cultivating the physical conception. And the third is the hankering. The third is the well-being. So the well-being is what, how to create a framework in which the people can enjoy on an intellectual platform. So as part of that, the king, he arranges for theaters, for musical programs, he arranges for art shows, and he also he also arranges for liquor houses, for places of prostitution, for gambling, etc. Because the king understands that if they are not provided, then those who are addicted to this will become agitated and will create disturbance in the society. So the king takes care of the needs so that the general populace is benefited. So as I was mentioning, when in the first canto we see when Krishna enters Dwarka, there's a mention that the quotations were present in the city. Even when Krishna was there in Dwarka, where everybody is a devotee, they were prostitutes. So it was understood that they lived outside the city, and but they were given the position of whatever they had. That this is the need that they are taking care of. So Prithu Maharaj, being the perfect king, he understands this principle. Now here he is, of course, he's taking care of the material needs. That they're hungry, I need to provide them with food. So he satisfies them by words, body, and thoughts. So he assures them, I'll take care of it, he'll take action, and he contemplates deeply about it. And later in the section, it is mentioned that it is the duty of the ruler that while the citizens are enjoying, also to elevate them spiritually. That is real preaching. That it is done in a way that the desired action is achieved. Preaching is not just speaking tattvas or quoting verses, but preaching is essentially changing the heart of the other person. Whether it is through prasadam, whether it is through speaking, whether it is through personal example, whether it is through giving a book, but those are essentially means to an end. Preaching is essentially what to do to change the heart of the other person. So the verse also indicates the competency of the king. That Maharaj Prithu, all by himself, is quite competent to understand the cause of the aberration and also rectify it. Verse 13. Iti vyavasito buddhya pragrita sarasanaha sandadevekshaham bhume krudas tripurhayataha. Having arrived at a conclusion, the king took up his bow and arrow and aimed them at the earth, exactly like Lord Shiva, who destroys the whole world out of anger. So Vishwanath Chakravarti Pad comments that King Prithu, as the king, was the protector of the earth. However, he thought, though I am the king, I will use the fourth method against the earth, who is hiding the seeds. The fourth method is punishment. It is Samdan, Bhed, Dand. So he says that Vishnu Chakravarti said he thought that even though I am the king, I'm supposed to be the protector, but I will now use Dand. He comes to this conclusion after proper deliberation. So Maitreya says that Prithu Maharaj becomes angry like Lord Shiva. And the implicit understanding is that it's not that Lord Shiva is always angry. He's opposite of that. But at the time of destruction, at the time of pralaya, he becomes angry. So the implicit context is Prithu Maharaj became angry like Lord Shiva at the time of destruction. So this reveals the nature of the anger of Maharaj Prithu. So one understands that Lord Shiva is not destroying the universe because he is angry, but he is using anger as a tool to help him execute this service that has been given to him by Krishna, which is the destruction of the universe. So it's not that Lord Shiva suddenly goes into a bad mood and says, okay, I'm angry, let me destroy the universe. But it's the other way around. When the time for the destruction comes, Lord Shiva says, now it is it's the time for me to do the duty that I have been asked to do by Krishna, which is destroy. And destruction, it requires anger. So then he uses anger, just like the point we were discussing earlier on, that Srila Prabhupada uses anger to help his disciples. Not that he becomes angry, but he uses anger. So Prithu Maharaj becomes angry after, in the previous verse it said that he contemplated for a long time. So he did not become angry seeing on an impulse, that he saw that his citizens were starving, and then he becomes furious and says, now I need to punish. So generally, anger in the mode of ignorance is without the deliberation of the mind. That's why it is said that when anger is there, then intelligence is destroyed. But this is not the anger in the mode of ignorance. This is Prithu Maharaj using anger as a tool to achieve what he needs to do in the service of the citizen. Because like in the Bhagavad Gita, it is said, one who comes under the control of anger is in the mode of ignorance. That's not the situation of Maharaj Prithu. So what is the conclusion that Prithu Maharaj comes to after contemplating? That the fault lies with Mother Earth. So he decides to punish her. So later in the chapter 22nd chapter, we will see that when Maitreya is speaking about the qualities of Prithu, then he actually glorifies Prithu. That Prithu Maharaj is as tolerant as the earth. But here we see that he is actually attacking the same Mother Earth that is compared to for tolerance. So this shows that what does tolerance mean? That he is tolerant with respect to his own situation, but intolerant to the suffering of others. So the principle is that one should practice these principles in such a way that there is respect of its impact on others. Like Arjun wanted to practice non-violence. Right? So he was saying that I'm tolerant, but the impact of it would have been that earth would have been overwritten by irreligious people. So that non-violence was actually the worst kind of violence. Similarly, between Diti and Kashyap, we see that Kashyap is practicing non-violent communication to Diti. Diti is indicating that she wants to have conjugal relationships at an inappropriate time. And Kashyap is speaking to her in a very pleasing way. And what was the result of that non-violent communication? That two of the most violent entities were created. So the underlying principle is that one should do not with respect to the consideration of that particular activity, but with respect to what its impact is going to be, whether it is over a period of time or whether it is over a group of people. So Prithu Maharaj understood that for him to be non-violent and tolerant at this time would result in him actually executing violence on his citizens. So that is why he takes on this role of being the aggressor. So Srila Prabhupada says that Prithu Maharaj found out the cause for the scarcity of the food grains, he could understand that it was not the people's fault, for they were not lazy in executing their duties. Rather, the earth was not producing sufficient food grains. This indicates that the earth can produce sufficiently if everything is properly arranged. But sometimes the earth can refuse to produce food grain for various reasons. The theory that there is a scarcity of food grains due to an increase of population is not a very sound theory. There are other causes that enable the earth to produce profusely or to stop producing. King Prithu found out the proper causes and took the necessary steps immediately. So it's interesting that Srila Prabhupada talks about this notion of how Mother Earth can produce sufficiently for everyone. In fact, now even science is actually ratifying that understanding. I was reading at one point where they were saying that a tract of land the size of the country of France can produce enough food grains for the entire world. But obviously we are not following that, because now that position is basically made more from the perspective of logistics, that if everything is cultivated properly, but whether through technology or through scriptures, they're coming to the same conclusion, that earth can produce sufficiently. If it's not, it's because of other reasons. In modern science, there is called the Gaia hypothesis, and which postulates that earth is a sentient conscious entity and responds to the consciousness of those that are living on it. And so it says that if the people would be satisfied with the vegetarian diet, then the earth has a capacity to feed 30 times the current population. Once when Srila Prabhupada was in Mauritius, then he was given the tour, and then he commented that, why are you only producing sugar canes over here? You use your land properly and you can produce sufficient crop to feed everyone there. So this was, of course, in the 70s. I'm not sure what the situation now is, but at that time, Mauritius was being used by the Britishers as a cash crop, that they were cultivating sugarcane and using it to sell sugar there. And Prabhupada made this comment that this is the improper use of the land. Similarly, in the US, 90% of the land produces grains that is never used by humans. It is essentially used for slaughterhouses. Only 10% actually goes directly for human consumption. Okay, so I'll stop over here and see if we have what discussion we have.
Prabhu, just one comment on the production of food. Just to regulate price, they have enough cereal or food that they dump just to maintain price.
You're right. I actually heard about it, that they dump grains, and actually in the US, the government pays the farmers not to grow crops. So if they see that there is an abundance and they don't want the prices to go down, so the government will actually pay the farmers to keep the lands fallow, not to cultivate. So it's an artificial imposition.
Yeah. Thank you.
Prabhuji, Hare Krishna Prabhuji. The reason why Mother Earth is not giving is that will be discussed in the next class, Prabhuji, or you can.
Yes, it actually comes in the later part of this chapter only.
Okay, sure, Prabhuji. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll end over here. Vanchakalpatarubhayachit kripa sindhubhya eva cha पतितनां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। अनंत कोटि वैष्णवृंद की जय। शिला प्रभुपाद की जय। निताय गौर प्रेमानंद। हरि हरि। Hare Krishna. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much, Prabhuji.